What's up, everybody? My name is Demetri Kofinas, and you're listening to Hidden Forces, a podcast that inspires investors, entrepreneurs, and everyday citizens to challenge consensus narratives and learn how to think critically about the systems of power shaping our world. My guest in this episode of Hidden Forces is Lawrence Fossi. Lawrence served as a commercial trial attorney until 2011 and as the portfolio manager for a family office until 2020. He has written extensively about the automotive company Tesla at Seeking Alpha under the pseudonym Montana Skeptic, and now publishes at montanaskeptic.substack.com. It's been 3 years since I last devoted an episode to the electric car company Tesla and its superstar CEO, Elon Musk. Given the progress that's been made in EVs in the years since, as well as the recent turmoil at Tesla, I thought it would be a good time to check in on how things are going at America's largest electric car maker. Our conversation today revolves around a recent ruling in a 2018 shareholder lawsuit brought against Musk and members of the Tesla board over a pay package that was at one point worth over $117 billion. While the details of the lawsuit are especially relevant to Tesla shareholders, and you may be one of them if you're invested in one of the many index funds that own its shares, the spectacle of egregiously excessive executive compensation and the failures of captured boards to exercise fiduciary oversight is part of an alarming trend of corporate corruption that concerns everyone, and which we discuss in more detail during the second part of today's episode. If you want access to that part of the conversation, you can join our premium feed and listen to the subscriber-only portion on your mobile device using your favorite podcast app by going to hiddenforces.io/subscribe. If you want to join in on the conversation and become a member of the Hidden Forces Genius community, which includes Q&A calls with guests, access to special research and analysis, in-person events, and dinners, you can also do that on our subscriber page. And if you still have questions, feel free to send an email to info@hiddenforces.io, and I or someone from our team will get right back to you. And with that, please enjoy this timely and enlightening conversation with my guest, Lawrence Fossi. Lawrence Fossi, welcome back to Hidden Forces after a very long absence of, I think, 5 years or so. You can tell me, maybe.
I think 5 years is right, and it's great to be back, Demetri. Thank you.
It's great having you on. That was your inaugural appearance on video, and I had flubbed it. I did something where the video, when it was exported, but recording in a studio at the time, we had video, was, we were at our most advanced stage of the podcast. And when we uploaded the video, only one of the audio channels was actually operating. And then I ended up having to delete the video after it went viral at tens of thousands of downloads and or views in a few hours. I remember at that time, it felt like the end of the world. But, everything passes after a few days. People forget.
The crazy times have only gotten crazier.
Yeah, so that was, so just to catch listeners up, that was, do you remember the date? Was it 2018 or 2019?
It was 2019, I believe.
Okay.
I think that's when Elon Musk tweeted out funding secured at $420 a share, right? So I think he did that in the summer, August-ish, and the SEC sued him, and we talked in September. And as we were right around that time, the Tesla board, so characteristically, came out with a strong statement fully supporting its CEO in his, use of Twitter to commit fraud.
Right. So you're right. The SEC had just sued Tesla and Musk for the funding secured tweet just a few days before our interview. And if I recall, that led to, was it 20 million? Was that the number for Tesla and for Musk? They each had to pay some amount in millions in legal.
Each had to pay 20 million. That's right.
Okay. And also there was some kind of a precondition around Musk not being able to use Twitter either unsupervised or at all. What was that also? I mean, because the funny thing is that there were restrictions put on Musk's use of Twitter, and then what happens a few years later? He actually buys the platform.
Right. As I recall, he was required to step down as chairman of the board for a couple of years, which he did, and that's how we got Robin Denholm. And then he was supposed to have some lawyer internally review his tweets if they related to Tesla. okay? Because if they're material and could relate to Tesla, that's important information for shareholders. And so such was born the so-called Twitter sitter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the SEC came back later and said, wait a minute, you've been tweeting has anybody reviewed these tweets that have to do with Tesla's business? What's going on? And it turned out that no, they hadn't been reviewed. Okay, they were material to the company, but hadn't been reviewed. It got into court in New York in front of a federal district court judge. I'm trying to remember her name. She's now an appellate judge. And she, instead of holding Tesla's feet to the fire for what was obvious contempt by Tesla and Musk, she told the parties to go put their reasonable pants on and to refine their agreement. And essentially, Musk has since then completely ignored the idea that anyone should ever review any tweet he makes about Tesla's business.
And also, Tesla's market cap exceeded at some point, I think in 2021, $1 trillion. So they were having all these issues that had no bearing on the stock whatsoever, at least not over the long term. It did maybe after the funding secure tweet, et cetera. And in that sense, I think he's been vindicated and proven himself to be, among other things, a remarkable marketer of Tesla and a brand unto himself. He's widely loved and seen as a kind of rock star. And we permit things of rock stars that we don't permit of normal people. So this conversation goes beyond Elon, but it's going to deal specifically with a recent ruling in a lawsuit filed in 2018 by Richard Ternetta against Musk and the Tesla board, for which a final judgment and order are still pending. Before we get into that, please catch me up and my audience up on conditions at Tesla since you were last on. What's been happening with the company and its larger-than-life CEO?
Yeah. So it's impossible to remember all the detail, just so much constant drama with Tesla, right? But in 2019, they almost went bankrupt, as Musk later admitted. And he made the promise that all Tesla vehicles were equipped with all the hardware they needed for full self-driving, which he'd started touting back in 2016 with a famous video called the Painted Black video, which turned out to be fraudulent. And he promised robotaxis were around the corner. Next year, there would be 1 million Tesla robotaxis on the road. And he promised this at, I think, what was called Autonomy Day. And then on the heels of that, he raised funds and was able to raise billions and billions of dollars of cash for Tesla, which, rescued it from any financial difficulty. They finally got the Model 3 out the door. The company turned the corner a couple of years ago and started to become profitable, which was a big accomplishment. You can question some of the accounting, and I certainly do, but it was decidedly profitable by 3 years ago, let's say. And the promises became more and more extravagant. The robotaxis didn't appear, but it was promised it will be next year or the year after that. There was the famous promise of the solar roof tiles, which never came to anything. And then Tesla, because of its profitability, was able to be included in the S&P 500, which, I view as something of a tragedy. When that happened, the share price began to just go through the roof. It was astronomical. And as you noted, its market cap, which was probably less than 50 million or so the first time we talked, shot up to $1.24 trillion at its highest point. Okay. And its share price was about $410 a share. And that was split adjusted, right? Because you have to multiply that by 15 to get the price pre the first stock split. So just astronomical, utterly unrelated to anything real about Tesla's fundamentals. And this compensation award that we're going to be talking about today, which was awarded in 2018, essentially rewarded Musk for increases in Tesla's market cap. Consequently, he was able to earn, in a relatively short period, 3 years, all of the 12 tranches under this stock grant. And, he had to get to 650 million. As I said, the stock got almost double that for a while. But since then, since November of 2021, the stock price has started to come back down to earth. And more importantly, Tesla's growth story has now become a shrinkage story. Its deliveries have actually decreased, despite the fact that it is, repeatedly slashed prices, which has hurt its margins. Its earnings estimates keep coming down, and it looks to me like this year, maybe it will earn $2 a share, maybe less. So you've got a price earnings ratio now of just, I don't know, 170 divided by 2. So 85 is the PE ratio forward looking. People are starting to become concerned. The big story Tesla had as we come into this year was it was going to come out with a lower cost car, the so-called Model 2, and it was going to build this with a brand new manufacturing technique called unboxed manufacturing. It was never clearly explained what that entailed, but Musk promised that it would lead to huge cost reductions in producing the car. And then just a few weeks ago, he suddenly changed course on that and said, well, we're not going to do that after all. There won't be any unboxed manufacturing. Instead, we're going to take some of our existing models and change them up a little bit. And so we're going to come out with a lower price car based on our existing manufacturing technology. And that was concerning to a lot of people because it's a real change in strategy for Tesla. And I mean, that's where we are today. He said, on August 8th, I'm going to reveal the robotaxi. There's going to be a big Tesla event, and the robotaxi will be revealed. The problem is that there is no such thing as a robotaxi, okay? Tesla has not achieved anything beyond level 2 autonomous capability. There are 5 levels, and it's stuck at level 2, and there's no reason to believe it's going to get past level 2 at any time in the near future. And a lot of people believe that the approach Tesla is taking to autonomous driving means it will never get there. That's kind of a blurting it all out. That's where we are.
So before we get into some of those more substantive details, something that I think many casual onlookers and followers of Musk will often wonder, given how successful he's been and how many of these criticisms of him don't seem to stake, is why is this guy constantly being attacked? Why is he constantly being attacked by the press and short sellers? Is it that they have an alternate agenda, or could it be because they just don't understand the mind of a visionary? How do you respond to that? How do you respond to those who say Musk isn't lying when he promises 1 million robotaxis on the road by 2020, or that Solar City will be tiling people's roofs with solar shingles? That's just his way of motivating people and generating excitement. Guys like Steve Jobs have set incredible goals and turned them into reality. So what separates Musk from these people who we hold in such high esteem?
Well, that's a terrific question. To me, Demetri, what is different about Elon Musk is that I think he is just an incurable, inveterate liar. And there's a difference between putting big goals out there and then just absolutely lying about what you're doing. For example, that 2016 video I mentioned where Tesla, released a video showing a car driving autonomously and said the driver is in the car only for legal reasons. It turns out that there were like 35 different takes to get to that there were many disengagements, that the whole thing was fraudulent, and that Elon Musk completely knew about that, approved it, and said, we're doing it anyway. Okay, and then he has been promising forever full self-driving and charging people for it. Some Tesla buyers paid $15,000 for full self-driving capability, which doesn't exist. It was a lie. It was a way for Tesla to raise revenue. The solar roofs, he showed a product that didn't exist and claimed that it did exist and claimed that Tesla would be installing, hundreds of thousands of these every year. Never happened, okay? Very tiny release of that product with lots of problems. And motivating people is one thing, but lying to them and defrauding them is another thing. And what troubles me about Tesla also is the utter lack of anything that we would recognize as traditional corporate governance at the company. The company is all about Elon Musk, all about his ambitions, and it suffers for that. I really do believe it suffers. And what you're seeing right now is to me, sound corporate governance is really important in the United States and in the Western world, but especially in the United States. You cannot have public companies functioning properly, allocating capital properly without sound governance. And Elon Musk has defied that at every turn. I think the Tornetta case that we'll discuss today is a distillation of that. And I think ultimately, it's bad for capitalism. It's a corruption of what capitalism should be. Capitalism should not be built on telling lies, on making promises you know that you cannot perform on corrupting your board of directors so that it becomes simply, a rubber stamp for you. And those things really trouble me. So, I've stayed interested in the story, less interested than I used to be, though. When Tesla built the plant in China, I wrote some articles with a collaborator named Maxed Out Mama about how Tesla's really becoming a Chinese company, which it has become in a lot of ways. So there are also really interesting geopolitical aspects to the Elon Musk story now that did not exist when you and I first talked.
Yeah, and national security questions as well. We have the example of Starlink, where he shut off Starlink for a period of time during the war between Russia and Ukraine. So he's a very influential and powerful figure within the national security space as well. SpaceX is another really influential company. So he's a commanding force in American industry.
Yeah, way too important. Yes, the government paid him for Starlink. He acted like he was coming to the rescue of the Ukrainians. In fact, he had a government contract. And he shut off Starlink in an operation over the Black Sea at one point, compromising the Ukrainians' military action. Who is he to do that, I ask? He constantly praises Chairman Xi in China with just absurd adulation, never acknowledging any of the repressive policies of the Chinese government, of course. And that's disturbing. He suggested that China really should have Taiwan after all, that it's just not worth fighting for and that it's really part of China. Really, thank you, Mr. Musk, Secretary of State. And he suggested that Ukraine should make peace with Russia instead of resisting what Russia's doing over there. Now, you can agree or disagree about any of those issues, but why is it that Elon Musk has such a powerful voice in all those things?
So I want to talk about some of those things for sure. But just to really clarify something, and at the risk of sounding redundant, is it your view that Musk isn't just different from other CEOs in degree? In other words, it isn't just that he takes greater liberties with the truth in order to generate excitement and motivate people, but that his statements and his promises are different in kind and that they are often outright lies that cross a line meant to deceive investors. And in so doing, he's created billions of dollars in new wealth for himself and his companies.
In my view, Demetri, they cross the line. They are clearly fraud. Who was it? Trevor Milton had the truck pushed down the hill at Nikola Motors. He went to prison for that, okay? Elon Musk, a few months ago, put up a video of a Porsche drag racing a Cybertruck that had a trailer attached to it and claimed that the Cybertruck had beaten the Porsche. And one of the big magazines, Motor Trend or Car and Driver, one of them went and redid all those tests and took that whole thing apart and wrote a very detailed account. And it turns out it's utterly untrue. It didn't happen. Tesla faked the results. It presented them in a very, very misleading way, and he got taken to task for that. Well, that's just obvious fraud, designed and approved of by Elon Musk, okay? Promising 1 million robotaxis, that was a promise. There's going to be 1 million robotaxis, and then raising billions of dollars off that promise. That is fraud. It's just pure and simple fraud. And, I feel like it's not just Tesla, by the way. A lot of the things he says about Mars are simply ridiculous. The things he says about the Hyperloop are utterly fantastic, and only an idiot could believe them, but they're plainly false. Neuralink, with Neuralink, there's a tremendous accomplishment to be able to, if you're paralyzed, to be able to control a cursor by thinking, okay? That's an amazing thing. But for him to go a step further and promise that he thinks they're going to cure paralysis with this, that is cynical. There's absolutely no basis for believing that any of the technology that exists now is pointing in that direction. And it's just Elon Musk saying things that just go way beyond puffing, go way beyond promotion. These are just blatant lies told by a man who has some need to be loved by everybody. I don't understand it. I don't understand the psychology of it. But clearly the guy is a narcissist, and clearly he's an egomaniac, and he's driven to say these things, and a lot of people believe him. It's a phenomenon, as you say. And who are we to criticize him because he lands rockets and he wants to save the earth and he's trying to lead us to a sustainable future? All things I think one can have lots of questions about. So he's become a cult figure to so many people, and you're not allowed to criticize in their mind.
So the last question I want to ask you before we get into the details of the 2018 compensation lawsuit is, why do you care? Besides the fact that he's gone after you personally, he famously called your employer and tried to have you fired. Why have you been motivated to cover this company, to write about it for so many years, and to continue to write about it despite the threats you faced?
Yeah. So actually, my writing did tail off for a while. I wrote about Tesla in China for a while because I think that's a really important story that's much bigger than Tesla. It has to do with our United States relations with China and how interesting and problematic it is to have a wholly owned U.S. company in China and what that has led to in terms of Musk helping China forward its own propaganda. I think that's an important story. So that's not about me hating Elon Musk. That's about me really being concerned about the geopolitical consequences of Tesla in Shanghai. And then I stopped writing at Seeking Alpha after that. I haven't written an article there for quite some time. Maybe I wrote one about the Twitter acquisition because I saw that as really, when Musk agreed to buy Twitter and then spent the next, 10 months trying to escape from the deal. That was just hilarious. And there was a lot to say there. And I'm a lawyer, so I'd read the merger agreement. And it was highly amusing to me that this so-called genius had managed to waive all his due diligence rights and then made up fabrication after fabrication and committed discovery abuse after discovery abuse, and finally was forced to buy the company for exactly what he had agreed to buy it for. And then recently, I have abandoned Seeking Alpha altogether, and I started writing about Tesla again, really because of this Tornetta case, which we're going to discuss today. Because, I'm trained as a lawyer, and it is a fascinating case, and I think it presents in a very crystal clear form the terrible corruption of corporate governance that's happened at Tesla. And I think that corruption of corporate governance has implications and resonance all over the business world. As an obvious example, the vast amount of compensation awarded to Elon Musk is kind of becoming like the new benchmark that are used by compensation consultants in this industry, where they forever keep pushing up the amount paid to CEOs in corporations. And I don't think that's a healthy phenomenon at all. But also you have the phenomenon here of a board of directors that is 100% utterly, totally, completely corrupted by Elon Musk. And the means of corruption are the extravagant stock option grants that have made so many of them multi-millionaires. And I think that's a very harmful thing. I think it's, when we talk about Tornetta, we can get into it more, but there you have my real concern. I think that this is corrupting an institution or a culture in American business that is vital to the success of and the prosperity America's experienced.
Look, when I started learning about this case, it was the board compensation that shocked me. As excessive and unnecessary as Musk's compensation package is, there is no amount of money you can pay a CEO today that's going to shock me, given what we've seen with executive compensation in recent years. But the compensation that board members were getting, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars in equity-based comp, for doing what exactly, besides approving Musk's own compensation requests, I'm not sure. This is what really shocked me. What are board members doing at Tesla to warrant this type of compensation? And how does that compare to what's typical for people who serve on corporate boards, both in terms of compensation and in terms of actual work they're putting in?
Yeah. In my youth, the board compensation you would get if a major company asked you to be a member of its board of directors, they might pay you $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 a month with a stipend for every meeting and reimburse your expenses, that kind of a thing, okay? So what Tesla does, I have never seen done anywhere. Robin Denholm, okay? Remember Robin Denholm? She
replaced Elon after the funding secured tweet and the SEC sued him, correct? She replaced him as chairman of the board?
Yeah.
Okay.
She did. That's right. She replaced Musk after he had to step down as chairman. And she has, with stock options granted to her, she's only cashed in, I think, less than half of them, but has wealth of more than $200 million, which, as the Tornetta court wrote, she acknowledged was a life-changing event for her. Okay, you give your chairman of the board stock worth $300-400 million, okay, and allow them to become richer than they ever dreamed of. And what have you done? Have you created an independent board member, or have you created a board member who will do exactly what you want? So the Tesla board is compensated in that manner, and they are paid to do nothing. They are paid to do what Elon Musk wants and nothing more, and that's exactly what they do. They do exactly what he wants and nothing more. There really is no board. It is all Elon. And this latest, gambit in Tornetta with a ratification vote, which we can talk about, just demonstrates to me beyond question that the board is completely captured by its CEO.
And again, I think it's important to reiterate that the shareholders being represented here are not just Elon and Tesla fans who are happy to give their money to the company. They also represent presumably millions of individual investors passively invested in Tesla through index funds as a result of the fact that Tesla is now part of the S&P 500. So corporate governance matters, irrespective of whether you like Tesla and think Elon's a rock star. So let's now turn our attention to the lawsuit that was brought forward by Richard Tornetta in 2018. In that lawsuit, he alleged that Tesla's directors breached their fiduciary duty by awarding Elon Musk a performance-based equity-based compensation plan. What are the details of this plan? What is it all about? And why should people care about those details?
Okay, that's a big question. First, just very quickly on the S&P 500. Tesla was included in it when its share price was well above 200. It's now, I don't know, today 177, 180. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at the latest price. So already the Tesla part of the S&P has lost tens of billions of dollars of value, okay? And while the S&P itself has gone up. So already hundreds of thousands, if not millions of 401k and IRA investors have been penalized by the lack of governance at Tesla. All right, but to get to Tornetta. So Richard J. Tornetta, who happens to be a drummer in a heavy metal band, among other things, was a Tesla shareholder who in 2018 looked at a compensation package that the Tesla board had just awarded to Elon Musk, and he filed a lawsuit in Delaware, a so-called derivative lawsuit. And he said, basically, I've asked the board of directors to undo this, and they've refused to, so I'm going to file suit on behalf of Tesla. And I derive my rights through Tesla. And I think that Tesla has been harmed by a breach of fiduciary duty of Elon Musk and of its board members in approving this 2018 compensation package. So what was that compensation package? Essentially, the board of directors in 2017 started to negotiate with Elon Musk over a package. Well, it turns out there were no negotiations. Musk just said, I want a new compensation plan. The one I had in 2012, I'm about to fulfill all the requirements there, so I want another one. And here's what I propose. I propose that if I can increase Tesla's market cap, then I will be rewarded with an additional 1% of the stock for every $50 billion of increased market cap. And, he already owned at this point, I think, 21.9% of the company, right? So an obvious question here is, wait a minute, aren't you already sufficiently motivated to see Tesla's market cap grow by the fact that you own 20% of the company? What more do you need? What more motivation is required? And in fact, if you look at what happened with Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, none of them have stock options like this because their ownership share in their companies was considered sufficient incentive for them to do this. There's no need further to align the interests of management with equity holders when the management is itself such a major equity holder. So Tornetta said, I think that package was wrong. And it turned out that it wasn't negotiated at all, that Elon proposed it. He dictated the timing of how the plan would be considered by the board and when it would come for a vote. And he said, and moreover, Elon is a controlling shareholder of Tesla, which in the lawsuit, Elon Musk denied and Tesla denied, but the court easily found that he is the controlling shareholder, even though he doesn't own 50%. So there wasn't any independence. And moreover, these board members who awarded it to him were not independent. They all have very close financial ties to him thanks to these stock options, and many of them are invested in his other companies. Many of them have achieved, in one case, dynastic and generational wealth from having business ties with him. And some of them have very close personal ties with him, including a fellow named Steve Jurvetson, who reportedly did drugs with Elon Musk. So Tornetta challenged the package, and he said it's not fair to the Tesla shareholders that such a package was awarded. It dilutes them to the extent of 10% of their shareholdings. And moreover, the milestones don't really have a lot to do with profitability. You know, the incentives created by those milestones was to pump up the share price with promises that couldn't be kept, which is exactly what Elon Musk did, to skinny down on cash expenses like research and development, which is why you have no Model 2 today, okay? Tesla's R&D is well below the percentage invested by other auto manufacturers. And so you had milestones that were not tied to profitability, really, and that created the wrong incentives. They created an incentive to pump stock, and they created an incentive to skinny down on expenses that the company really vitally needed if it was going to keep growing. So he challenged it, and this lawsuit was filed, let's say, in mid-2018, and it dragged on a long time during the pandemic, made it difficult to move forward with a lot of things in courts. And there was endless discovery, document requests and depositions and expert reports and all that sort of thing. And the judge who originally had the case, Vice Chancellor Slights, I think his name was, he retired from the Chancery Court, and the case was assigned ultimately to Kathleen McCormick, who is the Chancellor of the Delaware Court of Chancery. So she's like the chief judge, okay? I think there's a chancellor and there are 6 vice chancellors.
She's the one that also oversaw the Twitter case also, right?
If there's a picture of someone in Elon Musk's bedroom that he throws darts at, it's Kathleen J. McCormick, okay? Kathleen St. Jude McCormick, excuse me. Yes, she oversaw the Twitter case, and she was, I'm going to tell you, Demetri, I've seen a lot of judges in action in my life, a lot. And Kathleen McCormick, I've never seen a force of nature like her. She was on top of that case with multitudinous motions to rule on, and she made all these very detailed and intelligent rulings that kept the case moving. She basically guided the case along from the bench also by reminding Musk and his lawyers that they had waived due diligence and there were some real problems with what they were trying to do. And ultimately, Elon Musk, I think because of her really clear, incisive, correct rulings, realized he had better buy Twitter for what he promised to pay for it. So that was a tough, Musk badly wanted out of that deal. It's hurting him every 3 months when he has interest payments to pay. Those are really stinging right now with Twitter suffering. But yes, ironically, that very same judge is the one who was handed the Tornetta case. And in January of this year, on January 30, she handed down a 200-page opinion. And I know I've sent you a copy of it, and it's easily accessible if anyone wants to read it. It's a brilliantly written, very clear, pleasure to read, and it details the facts in the case, Tornetta's claims. She concludes that Musk is the controlling shareholder, that the special committee that awarded him the compensation was not, in fact, independent at all. And because of those things, what you normally do in Delaware is you say, okay, the board of directors decided to pay its manager this. That is a business judgment for the board. We're not going to second guess that. That is universally what happens, except when you have this circumstance of a controlling shareholder being awarded something by a special committee that's not independent. Then the test becomes something called entire fairness. And that's a very different standard. And the judge said, look, under the entire fairness standard, one, there was no benchmarking of this compensation award. It's more than 200 times greater than any compensation award that's ever been awarded in, U.S. public company history. And 2, there were no negotiations. Musk just dictated it himself. That's not fair. The proxy statement that was given to shareholders to vote on this omitted the fact that Musk himself devised the plan originally. even though earlier drafts of the proxy statement had included that. Who do you think at Tesla wanted that removed? The proxy statement pretended that these directors were independent when they were not. And in terms of an entire fairness analysis, no one at Tesla ever asked this question, no one on the board. Why does Elon Musk need more motivation when he already owns 21.9% of the company? For every 50 billion increase in the market cap, his wealth will increase by 10 billion. Isn't that sufficient motivation? No one ever asked the question, and of course, there's no good answer to that question.
Great answers so far. Let me pause you here for a second, Lawrence, just to try to cut through some of the legal language and try and summarize my sort of impression of this. At its heart, I think what's being alleged here, as I understand it, is that among the three parties involved, one being Elon, who stands to make billions of dollars in new compensation, another being the board, who are being compensated hundreds of millions of dollars themselves for their role in ratifying said compensation, and a third being the shareholders who are purchasing the stock being issued to compensate the previous two. It's the shareholders who are being screwed, correct?
Correct.
So how big is the compensation we're talking about here? Because I'm not sure we put a figure on it yet.
Well, ultimately, it worked out to 304 million shares of the stock of the company. That's what's at stake, 304 million shares, all right, which is about 10% of the company. So that's why the shareholders would suffer 10% dilution.
So what is that worth right now? Because presumably he'd be able to start exercising it by 2025 if this doesn't get struck down in the final analysis, correct?
Yeah. I think he might be able to start exercising it sooner, simply to pay the taxes and the strike price. He would be allowed to exercise and sell some of the shares right away. There's a lot of pros and cons to doing that. But what's it worth today? With the strike price is $23.34 per share. Let's say the stock is trading at 177 today. I haven't checked, but around there. So it's about $47 billion or so today of value. Okay, that's the net value of this.
Okay, so where do we stand right now? How has Musk responded to this ruling, and what are the next steps for the court and for Tesla?
Okay, so after the ruling came out, let's say you were on the board, Demetri. Here's what you might say. You might say, well, maybe we just dodged a bullet. We gave Elon Musk compensation for increasing the market cap of Tesla all the way to $650 billion, and he went way beyond that. But we had no clawback in there. We didn't say, oh, you have to give some of this back if the market cap decreases. And we said you had to meet certain operational milestones in connection with that, like revenue and EBITDA. But we didn't say there's a clawback if our revenue and EBITDA fall below those milestones that you once achieved. And in fact, what has happened since you achieved all these stock option awards is that the market cap has fallen. It's fallen from $1.24 trillion down to $650 billion. And now it's closer to $550 billion. And 2 or 3, and at one point a couple of weeks ago, 4 of the 12 tranches that you earned, you would no longer be able to earn. So what we did was we gave you incentives to do things that were not sustainable, to achieve market cap that was not sustainable, to achieve EBITDA, which are adjusted earnings, basically, earnings minus a lot of real costs that are non-cash. We gave you incentives to do these things. They were not durable. They were not sustainable. We made a real mistake. So thank you, Chancellor McCormick, for rescuing us from this terrible thing we did. That's what you, Demetri Kofinas, might have done were you on the board of directors of Tesla. But the Tesla board, instead, immediately you had Elon Musk take to Twitter within half an hour after the decision came down and say, no company should ever incorporate in Delaware. It's a terrible place. Elon Musk really hated Kathleen McCormick after this happened, and by extension, the fact that he had to be subject to the very highly evolved, well-established Delaware corporate governance laws. And he hated her for Twitter already. He had a vendetta against her. He was determined to, in his usual vicious, nasty, vindictive way, strike back. So he immediately began campaigning for Tesla to reincorporate in Texas, which is part of all this. And he devised a plan. Maybe it had been cooked up during the trial, but he devised a plan to have the shareholders ratify, we'll talk about that, the 2018 award instead of issue a new award. Well, issuing a new award was not possible at this point because the share price was so high. Tesla was able to claim that the compensation expense for the original award was only $2.2 billion, okay, by various discounting factors. It can't do that anymore because the share price is high. If it wanted to give Elon Musk today $47 billion, it would have to reflect compensation of $47 billion. That would cost it GAAP earnings for a long time. It would probably cost it its place in the S&P 500. So that's out of the cards. The only way to do this is to try to restore that 2018 grant. So they came up with a plan to reincorporate in Texas and to have the shareholders ratify the original 2018 plan. There are so many problems with that. I mean, let's talk about reincorporation in Texas first. The court that they're going to use in Texas is called the Texas Business Court. It was just created. It won't start business until September of this year. There aren't any judges appointed to it yet. They're political appointees, and they're probably unconstitutional because the Texas Constitution requires elected judges. Texas has no developed corporate law. It has a business organization code, but it really largely mimics Delaware law. It's just that Delaware courts are so much more adept at handling these complex litigation disputes. And moreover, the Delaware Chancery Court is nonpartisan. It has to, by law, when its members are appointed, one has to be from one party, then the next has to be from the other political party, back and forth. So you don't have some kind of partisan bent on it. And instead you're saying, well, we want to be out of Delaware where we have this established law with this nonpartisan court and go to Texas where the attorney general is Ken Paxton, where they have just created this brand new business court that appears to violate the Constitution and doesn't even exist yet. So you got to wonder about that. That to me was a move of pure vindictiveness. So that's the reincorporation part of the vote. Now we can talk about the ratification part if you want.
Right. So by what legal mechanism can this grant be ratified if it's been rescinded by the chancellor in Delaware?
Right. Well, what Tesla said, what the board said in its proxy statement that it issued on April 17 is, first of all, they created a new compensation committee with one person on it, Kathleen Wilson Thompson, a director who was not involved in the original grant, right? And they said, this special committee of one has issued a report. Well, it was written entirely for her, I guarantee you. And the report said, well, I can't go back and look at everything again. It's not appropriate for me to negotiate with Elon Musk over this. I just think what the board did back in 2018 is just fine. And that's what I'm suggesting we do. That's my report. Now, who is Kathleen Wilson Thompson? She's a director who, it turns out, has about $170 million or so of new wealth created by Tesla stock options. She has sold about $62 million worth of stock.
That is a wild amount of money. What did she do before she got on the board?
And she still owns another 771,000 shares, right? So What did she do? She was the human resources director at 2 or 3 different companies. So human resources, okay? I mean, I'm sure that's a really important job, but boy, at Tesla, talk about the worst human resources in the world. They just fired 15, 20% of their workforce. They're being sued for systemic racist practices. They treat their workers just like garbage. I mean, good job, Kathleen. So glad you joined the company. Are doing such a brilliant, by the way, I should be careful, Kathleen and Kathleen. Kathleen is the chancellor. Kathleen Wilson Thompson is the director. So that's what she did. Clearly, that kind of compensation is just a galaxy away from what would be expected for someone of her background, okay, and the role she serves as a director. So they said we're going to have the shareholders vote under Section 204 of the Delaware General Corporation Law, which is a ratification section that is intended to cure really technical defects in the way something is authorized. It is not intended at all to cure a fundamental breach of fiduciary duty. And so there are many problems with this. There's a very powerful argument to be made, and it's been made by a lot of very intelligent people, including Professor Ann Lipton, including Professor Charles Elson, that if Tesla were to actually, if this ratification were successful, that would be corporate waste. You cannot reward somebody for something that's already happened, that they've already done. And you're basically giving them something for free. And that is wasting the company's assets. It's a violation of your duty to the shareholders. I think you're familiar with Professor Lipton, Demetri.
I am, and I actually have a quote of hers in the intelligence report, my favorite, that I painstakingly transcribed from an interview she gave on CNBC, where she compared the compensation package that the board awarded Musk to Tesla, quote, lighting its assets on fire because it's fun, as part of an argument that she was making for why approving that compensation package would require a unanimous shareholder vote, because it's payment for work that Musk's already performed, which means the company doesn't get any additional benefit from it. And, more to the point, there's no benefit to shareholders. That's really the key thing here. I think it makes absolutely no sense. So why are we doing it?
It absolutely made no sense. And of course, the board made no effort whatsoever to address that in the proxy statement. Why Elon Musk needed more incentive than he has, because it's an unanswerable question, and the board knows, Elon knows that. And the lawyers that Elon had draft all this stuff up for the little puppet board to just mouth. They know that too. And it's my opinion that it is highly likely that if the ratification vote succeeds, the Delaware court will view it as a null and void effort. It's not sufficient to put things back to the way they were before the judge rescinded the award of those 304 million shares. So it's a completely useless effort that the shareholders are being put through here. But of course, there's a great deal of drama around it, as you know, with Elon Musk saying, I might leave. I might take with me robotics and artificial intelligence.
Right.
You're familiar with some of that.
Yeah, and it's unclear whether that's even legal, if he can do that too, right? I mean, if he's developing something within the company and then decides to just take it, that doesn't seem consistent with his role as CEO of that company. Lawrence, I'm going to move the rest of our conversation onto the premium feed, where I really want to go beyond Tesla. Well, one, I want to understand what explains the permissibility of lax ethical standards at Tesla. Is how much of this is idiosyncratic, and how much of it reflects a broader industry trend. And I also include in that the way in which Elon does seem to be able to operate with impunity in a way that doesn't seem consistent with what we've seen. You mentioned Trevor Milton, the Nikola CEO. There are other cases where this would not be permitted, but it's permitted with Tesla. So I want to see if you could help me understand why that is. And then I'm curious also to see what effect this behavior at Tesla has had downstream. Have we seen Tesla lead the pack in terms of compensation? And then have we seen other companies adopt similar strategies as a result? I mean, this is something that'd be interesting to discuss, because the larger context, again, is that I think Americans in general are aware that American capitalism has become more corrupt. Our political system has become more corrupt. There's regulatory capture. And so understanding what accounts for this is something that affects everyone, not just investors in or supporters of Tesla. For anyone who is new to the program, Hidden Forces is listener supported. We don't accept advertisers or commercial sponsors. The entire show is funded from top to bottom by listeners like you. If you want access to the second part of today's conversation with Lawrence, head over to hiddenforces.io/subscribe and sign up to one of our 3 content tiers. All subscribers gain access to our premium feed, which you can use to listen to the rest of today's conversation on your mobile device using your favorite podcast app, just like you're listening to this episode right now. Lawrence, stick around. We're going to move the rest of our conversation onto the premium feed. If you want to listen in on the rest of today's conversation, head over to hiddenforces.io/subscribe and join our premium feed. If you want to join in on the conversation and become a member of the Hidden Forces Genius community, you can also do that through our subscriber page. Today's episode was produced by me and edited by Stylianos Nicolaou. For more episodes, you can check out our website at hiddenforces.io. You can follow me on Twitter @Kofinas, and you can email me at info@hiddenforces.io. As always, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.